Hello and welcome to the webinar on Immigration Services Work Permit, organized by the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce in partnership with SMB Business Immigration. I am Adrian Badawi, Market and Public Affairs Manager at the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, BCCC. Before we start, I want to thank our annual sponsors, Vale, Proactiva Results, 4B Mining, Brookfield, Lundin Mining, BMA Law, and Mellowrock Logistics for their continued support. This webinar will discuss the process for individuals who want to migrate to Canada by applying for a work permit visa and the challenges and opportunities for companies that bring workers to Canada. Before we dive into the main content, I want to introduce the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, the BCCC. We are an independent, no-profit organization that has promoted connections between Brazil and Canada for over 50 years. Our mission is to enhance bilateral trade and investment relations and promote the exchange of experience between both countries, private and public sectors. To learn more about the BCCC and stay up to date on upcoming events, please visit our website at brascanchamber.org and follow us on social media. And now we are honored to have Sonia Mirbaha, Principal Partner at SMB Immigration Services, and Rebecca Godinho, Immigration Lawyer at SMB Immigration Services, as our presenters. Sonia and Rebecca, please, let's begin with an informative work permit visa process session.
Thank you, Adriani. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thanks for BCCC for organizing this event. We've been a proud member of BCCC for almost more than 2 years now, and we're happy to have this session, webinar informative session about work permit, as we know that this is a big topic, huge topic for both employers and employees inside Canada and the ones from outside who are trying to move to Canada. Before I get into all the details, I will give you a little blurb about our firm. SMB Business Immigration is a boutique immigration firm in Canada, in Toronto, that is operating mainly on all levels of immigration, any application dealing with Immigration Canada. We have an expertise of dealing with it. Our main focus is on work permits and on dealing with corporate immigration, which means helping the employers to relocate their services and their businesses in Canada and how to bring their foreign nationals and foreign talents to Canada. I'm the principal partner of the firm, and I've been practicing for many years in immigration law, and I initiated this firm about 4.5 years ago, and I'm happy that with the level of service that we're providing to the clients, the corporate clients are growing. The number of corporate clients are growing more and more every year. Now, with me, Rebecca Godinho is going to be part of the panelists. She's an immigration lawyer at our firm, and whoever that's interacting with her firm will probably hear her name a lot and see her face a lot. She's a great addition to the team. She's been with us years ago and left and came back again, so we're happy to have her. And you'll be hearing from her during this webinar with some information about the work permit. Now, going into the agenda and what we're actually going to talk about today. So like I said, work permit is a very broad topic. And the reason that I asked you guys in the chat room that, please go ahead and let us know. The number of participants are going up, and it's good for us to know whether you're coming from the employer side or the employee side, so that we can direct our conversations today more towards your needs and your possible questions or concerns. As for the agenda, we're going to be talking about, this is more of a high level information about the work permits, and we're more than happy to answer your specific questions at the end of this event, or later on if you would like to email that to us. You would have the email address of myself and Rebecca towards the end, and then we're more than happy to answer it more specifically after this webinar as well. In terms of agenda, we're going to be talking about two main points, or actually, yes, two main points about the work permits, or types about the work permits. One type is the employer-specific work permit, which the LMIAs and the non-LMIAs, LMIA exempts are sort of falling under that. And the other type is the open work permits. And we're going to be talking about the eligibility requirements in a short form. Obviously, if I want to start talking about them in detail, I can talk days and days. But it's more of a high level information about those categories. And then also the work permit extensions for those people who are inside Canada right now and who are looking to extend their work permits. What's going to happen? What are the processing timelines? What are the implications? And then after that, obviously, we'll get into the question and answer, which is the best part of the webinars usually. So we'll start with the employer-specific work permits and the LMIAs. What are the LMIAs? LMIA stands for Labor Market Impact Assessment, and that's the document that some of the employers may need in order to hire a foreign national in Canada. This part of the process is being handled by Service Canada. It has nothing to do with IRCC Immigration Canada. It's a different department that handles it. And essentially, the employer has to prove to Service Canada that there is no other foreign national or there's no other Canadian been found for this specific role that they're trying to hire. And therefore, they're extending the job offer to the foreign national they're planning to hire. Obviously, the LMIA or the hiring process shouldn't have any negative impact on the Canadian labor market, meaning that if there are other potential Canadians or PRs that are qualified for the job, the priority is given to those. And if the employer can, prove and show that there is absolutely nobody else available, then this opportunity will be given through the positive LMIA to the employer to hire the foreign national. The LMIAs are usually categorized to three different streams: high wage, low wage, and global talent stream. You don't see the low wage here on my list because low wage is usually targeted towards very specific occupations. If any of you have questions about the low wage LMIA, maybe we can discuss that later after the webinar. I'm more focusing on the high wage LMIAs here and the global talent stream. The high wage LMIA, so the wage factor is one of the main factors when we're applying for an LMIA. The wage is determined in Canada based on every single occupation for every single industry. So, for example, when an employer is contacting us and letting us know that, hey, I'm trying to hire a software developer in Vancouver, we would have to look into the median wage set up for software engineers in Vancouver area. That number might be very different than the software engineers who are intending to work in Ontario or Alberta or Saskatchewan or any other provinces. So really, we're looking at the title of the work, the position, and the geographical area that the worker or employee is intending to work. So if the wage is provided by the employer is meeting the median wage or higher, then we're using high wage LMIA to process the application. It has certain requirements, certain type of application form that needs to be filled up, certain type of information that needs to be transferred to Service Canada, and the processing times typically used to be 3 to 4 months. Nowadays, it's been processed really, really fast because finally, Government of Canada has realized that there's a huge shortage or lack of skill in Canada. And so in order to facilitate the employers to hire faster and more efficient, they're also processing the LMIA application applications faster, which is great. We've always struggled with the high-wage LMIAs. We've always sort of refrained from applying through that process. But nowadays, it's been, I would say, 3-4 months that I'm seeing that all my clients, the applications are going through really fast. There are not so much daunting interviews with Service Canada involved anymore. And so it's a great opportunity for employers to hire under this category. Another great category of LMIA, which probably the name might have been familiar to many of you, Global Talent Stream, or GTS, is my favorite, is the one that came into effect as sort of like temporary policy back in 2017 to help the IT companies in Canada or the IT industry in Canada to grow. And then it just worked really well that it turned to be a permanent policy and regulation. And so we kind of continued on until today. And the government of Canada also added few occupations, which I'll talk about, late last year in December 2022, which kind of expanded the list of professionals and just made it even more available and accessible for employers. So you'll see the occupation list. It's kind of tiny here. I'm trying to make it a little larger so that you guys can see it. If you can see, there are 17 occupations here that are targeted by Global Talent Stream. Mainly out of the 17, I would say maybe like 11 of them, majority of them, are designed for or geared towards IT industry. Like I said, initially this program came into effect only focusing on IT industry. But last year, December 2022, again, in an effort to help employers in Canada to start, hiring more skilled talent in Canada, they added few more, like 5 or 6 more occupations, which are listed here: civil engineers, electrical engineers, mining engineers, aerospace engineers. Those 4 occupations have just been added recently, and that's just a great indication that government is realizing that mining companies here are lacking skilled talent in Canada. So let's just help them bring skilled people from outside of Canada, or if there's somebody who finishes their studies in Canada and they're foreign nationals under a study permit, let's just help the companies hire those people too, and sort of transfer the study permit to work permit and allow them to stay in Canada and work. So a great opportunity. This LMIA, the reason I'm saying it's my favorite process is that it's just being done so quick, so fast. The processing time is 10 business days. There are certain commitments that employer has to provide to the government. So essentially government is saying that, hey, Mr. Employer, we're processing your application really quick in 10 days, but in return, you have to give us certain commitments so that we know that you're trying to grow your company, grow your business, you're trying to hire more people in Canada. Sorry about the background. I'm just very close to the fire station. It will go away in 2 minutes, hopefully. And so, yes, back to the commitments, provide commitments so that we know that you are intending to grow in Canada. The commitments are not really, hefty or not really out of scope. There are certain things that kind of organically comes with how the company grows in Canada. We can definitely get into more details if any of you are interested in this program, and chat more about what those commitments are and how they're affecting your company. So going to the next slide, if I can just figure out how to go to the next slide. There we are. Okay. The LMIA exempt categories. So as I said, so we talked about the LMIAs. Now, there are other types of work permits that are being processed and assessed under LMIA exempt, meaning that LMIA is not required in those cases. One of the prime examples is ICT. intracorporate transfers. And what's that? That program is designed for employees that are being transferred from the parent company outside of Canada to the subsidiary or the affiliate or branch in Canada. And the corporate relationship is obvious. This is mainly designed for international corporations that are trying to open up their shops in Canada or have opened up their businesses in Canada a while ago, and now they're trying to transfer employees between two companies. Obviously, the employee that is being transferred has to have at least 1 year experience out of 3 years in the past 3 years, and has to have specialized skill, talent, or be in the managerial role. And the work permits are issued for the duration of somewhere between 1 year to 3 years, again, depending on what type of ICT. Is this going to be senior manager or C-suite person being transferred to Canada, or is this going to be a specialized skilled person, such as very specialized software developer, for example, or a mining engineer? The duration of work in Canada is sort of being assessed and evaluated based on that. Now, I did a lot of talking. I'm going to bounce it back to Rebecca. Rebecca, in terms of ICT, what have you seen? What are the latest trends? What have you seen in terms of any updates or developments lately?
Yeah, so Sonia, just looking at our clients and their experiences, we're seeing that some applications are being processed faster than others, depending on where the country, which country they're applying from. And also some individuals can expedite the process by applying at the border, and that's if they don't require a visa. So in these cases, they'll only require an ETA, which stands for Electronic Travel Authorization, which is a really quick process to apply for. A nominal fee, you get the authorization, as quick as immediately or within 72 hours. And the advantages that we see of applying at the border is that while individuals still have to make sure that they have a comprehensive and proper package, the application gets approved, pretty much on the spot, and then they avoid any administrative backlogs or processing delays that might come into effect when it's being sent to the consulate. So overall, I'd say that as long as the eligibility requirements are being met, I think that the ICT Work Permit Program is a really effective tool within Canadian immigration for sort of circumventing the LMIA process and bringing employees to Canada much faster.
Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca. One thing that I wanted to add here is that I alluded to the fact that this program is really designed for international companies, but that doesn't mean that any other company or a smaller or startup company can't use this process to transfer the operations to Canada or the employees to Canada. I've seen and I've assisted many clients and companies who are small in size, but they wanted to, open up their first shop or, for the first time in Canada. And so they're really small in size in Canada, and they only want to bring, let's say, their top manager to start signing the contracts with the clients or with the customers and sort of managing the operations in Canada, start hiring in Canada. So in that sense, it kind of applies to all sorts of ranges of companies, not only international companies. I just wanted to clarify that. So moving on to international free trade agreements, we've got a whole bunch of countries that have signed an agreement with Canada. The very famous one that probably everybody is aware of is NAFTA. That's the old name. The new name is CUSMA, Canada, US, Mexico agreement. So similar to that, there are so many other countries that have signed the agreement. And what it means is that if an employee is trying to come and are, nationals of those countries and are trying to come from that country to Canada to work here for the employer in Canada, then we may be able to look into free trade agreements as one of the options as well. Now, Rebecca, I know there are too many countries and we probably can't get into too much of details, but can you name some of the countries that have signed the FTA with Canada?
Sure. Another one that we come across quite a lot is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, or CPTPP. And it has a number of signatory nations, including Chile, Japan, Mexico, Peru, and there's quite a few others as well. And there's also the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA, which is between Canada and other member nations of the European Union.
Right. And so I don't, thinking about the FTAs, I don't think we particularly have any international trade agreements signed with Brazil. So for people that are coming from I think you're correct. So people that are coming specifically from Brazil to Canada, we have to look into the other options that we already discussed, that being LMIA, any categories of LMIA, or ICT. So work permits under the startup visa program, this might be interesting for many of the startup companies. So as you know, if you're a startup and if you're applying for permanent residency through that program, it is a very long processing time these days. So as an option, what IRCC and Immigration Canada is giving to the applicants is that they realize that obviously these applicants are all entrepreneurs that wanted to bring their activities to Canada, and they can't just wait like 2-3 years. That's a very long duration of time in this day and world. So they're offering the work permit as an option. What it means is that the work permits will have to be applied right after filing for the PR, or in some cases it may be applied before the PR as well. And Rebecca, can you give us some more insights into how we're operating on that work permit?
I just wanted to start with talking about the difference between closed work permits and open work permits. So a closed work permit only allows foreign workers to work for a specific employer in a specific position that's listed on their work permit document, whereas an open work permit lets foreign workers work in any position for any employer anywhere in Canada. So work permits under this startup visa application category are closed, since the purpose of this work permit is really to enable entrepreneurs to enter Canada to sort of initiate and develop their business activities, as would be indicated in their commitment certificate. And so the employer on this work permit would be the name of the new Canadian company, meaning that they wouldn't be able to work for any other employer in Canada. And this work permit is also valid for a period of 1 year, so that these entrepreneurs can start working in Canada while their application for PR is being processed.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Let's move to the other slide. Okay, now open work permits. With all that being said, everything that we talked about so far, we all talked about the closed work permit, employer-specific work permit, that, as Rebecca alluded to, is very much specific to the company that the person is working for. Now, we've got another type of work permits. We call it open work permit, and as the name indicates, it's open. It's not really linked to any specific employer in Canada, but there are certain circumstances under which the applicants or individuals can apply for those type of work permits. The first one, and the very famous one, the majority of the people are aware of, is PHWP, postgraduate work permit. And that's really designed for international students, or foreign nationals that are studying in Canada, finishing the duration of education, and then later, right after finishing the period of education, the Canadian government is allowing them to apply for a work permit. It's an open work permit, so that it allows them to really work for any kind of job or look for any kind of job in Canada. The duration of PHWP is really dependent upon the duration of education in Canada. So if the, let's say, program of study is 1 year, then the PHWP is going to be issued for 1 year. But if it's 2 years or more, then the PHWP might be extended, or it might be issued for a period of up to 3 years. So it's really depending on what the program of study is. There are so many little details about the PHWP that I, unfortunately, given the time frame that we have today, I couldn't really fit in here, but I'm more than happy to take up the questions, as I said, or answer the questions right after the webinar. The new regulation that came into effect, I believe about a week ago or 10 days ago, is allowing the PHWPs to be extended in Canada. So classically speaking, PHWPs or never or are not meant to be extended inside Canada. So whatever you get as the first term or duration, that's it. And you couldn't really extend it unless you would switch it to another type of, process, work permit process. But then as of 10 days ago, the Minister of Education, Mr. Sean Fraser, confirmed that PGWPs are going to be extended as of April 6th for the period of up to 18 months. So whoever that's eligible, and then eligibility criteria is obviously quite some bullet points, but the main point is that whoever with the PGWP expiring in 2023 and some that expired in 2022, again, we have to look into the details, could use this new regulation as of April 6th next week to apply for extension of PGWP. Again, reach out to us if you have questions about it or if you want to apply and need help on the process. The second very famous one is bridging the open work permit, and that's really, as the name indicates, it bridges the work permit status with the PR status. That's really designed for PR applicants, whoever that applied for permanent residency through any of the programs, either PNPs, provincial nominee programs, or express entry, and the work permit is expiring here. The government is allowing them to apply for this open work permit to sort of bridge their status and give them a legal status in Canada until their PR application is being finalized and assessed. Now we've got two other kinds of open work permits. Rebecca, your turn.
Yes. Thanks, Sonia. Okay, so the open spousal work permits, there's typically two ways you can bring your spouse or your common law partner to Canada. So firstly, when you as the principal applicant are applying for a work permit or a study permit, for example, you can actually include your spouse at the time of your application as a dependent family member. Secondly, you as the principal applicant can enter Canada first and then submit your spouse's application at a later date. In either case, the validity period of your spouse's work permit or study permit will always match yours. The next category I wanted to discuss was the open work permits for those who are being abused or at risk of being abused in relation to their job. So workers currently inside Canada on a valid employer-specific work permit and who report being the victim of abuse in relation to their employment may be eligible for this program. And we've seen two examples where a worker was able to obtain an open work permit in this situation. So in the first case, once the employee landed in Canada and started working for the employer actually stopped paying them at some point. And so the employee did inform IRCC, and they showed the proper documentation and the proof of this happening, and they were successfully issued an open work permit. In the second case, the employer actually ended up going bankrupt. So this means that the employee was going to lose their job. And so with the new open work permit, they were able to move on and work for another employer.
Yeah. I just have to add that we don't see that often, right, Rebecca? It's rarely happening that an employer who's offering a job, to an employee from outside of Canada kind of falls short of the requirements and not being able to pay and so forth. But it's out there, and we just wanted you guys to be aware of it in case if that's the situation, unfortunately, in your case. Okay, and the work permit extensions. So all that we talked about up to this point is how you can obtain a work permit and how you can obtain a legal status as a worker in Canada and be able to work. Now, if you've got that and you're getting close to the end of the validity of your work permit, what's going to happen next? How do you extend your work permit in Canada? Obviously, the sort of extension, the eligibility for extension, let's say, is dependent upon the type of work permit that was initially been issued to you. So some work permits, for example, under FTAs are only being issued for 1 year with no extensions. There are different variations to different types of work permits. So we really have to look into what's the initial kind of work permit that you received, and then based on that, advise you whether you're allowed to extended and for how long the extension is going to be given to you. The processing times is a downfall, unfortunately, with IRCC on all kinds of programs. The processing time for extensions in Canada right now is 5 to 6 months. It's a long period of time, I understand, but that's unfortunately what it is. And we've been promised again by the Minister of Immigration that this year in 2023, hopefully towards summertime, the processing times are going to be shortened and being done more efficiently. But as of now, we're still standing at 5 to 6 months. So I would encourage everybody or anyone who has a work permit that is expiring in the next 5 to 6 months, or maybe even 7 to 8 months, consider the extension and start thinking about how to extend that work permit so that you can continue working in Canada. As I don't know if you remember at the beginning of our conversation, Rebecca sort of alluded to the fact that some work permits can be applied to at the border for individuals coming from visa exempt countries. It's the same case with extensions, sort of. If, for example, if a US citizen is in Canada by work permit and would like to extend the work permit, but doesn't want to wait 5 to 6 months because of business restrictions or personal reasons, that person can travel to the border and try to make a U-turn, come back to Canada, and then be issued a new work permit at the border. And that takes only maybe like half a day or 2 hours. Similar to the other countries, the nationals of other countries who doesn't require a visa to come to Canada. So again, if you think you're falling on that category, and if you think that you may be eligible for that, it's a little tricky. There are some nuances to it, so we have to kind of look at the whole picture and making sure that you're really eligible. By all means, get in touch with us and we'll answer your questions. Now with that, I think we passed on all the information that we could in the span of 20 minutes or 25 minutes about the work permits. We're opening up the floors for questions and answers. This is myself and Rebecca's email address right here, in case if you want to get in touch with us later. And then you have our website as well, smblaw.ca. We're more than happy to visit us, check our services. And like I said, any questions after the webinar, send us an email. Rebecca, I think we've got a whole bunch of questions.
I'm just looking into the chat now, and I don't know if we'll get around to everybody's question, but if we don't, like Sonia mentioned, please do send us an email and we'll definitely look into your case. Just before we start as well, just a quick disclaimer before we begin our Q&A session that we're not providing any legal advice today. This is just for general information purposes. Okay, so I think the first question that somebody had submitted prior to starting the webinar was, if an applicant has applied for a work permit with an LMI exemption under public policy measures, he can hold 2 kinds of work permits. Can he apply for an open work permit as well, or does he have to continue to hold his closed work permit with a specific employer?
I definitely need more information. I'm not sure if this applicant particularly is here right now, but if he or she is part of the participants, if you can just try to send me an email right after this event, because I need to know more. What type of LMIA exempt work permit are you holding right now, and why exactly you would want to apply for open work permit? Because we typically don't advise having 2 types of work permits at the same time. There are being issued in some specific cases to students where there is a co-op work permit and then there is another type of work permit, but typically it's not being applied to the general public or to foreign nationals. So I would want to know more in order to answer your question.
Okay, so another question that we have is from Giselle Ribeiro. She says she just finished her ECA course at Anderson College, which doesn't give the PGWP. Is there any other way she can extend her work permit or another way to obtain it?
So by saying that it's not eligible for PGWP, is Anderson College not in the list of designated institutions? And is that why you can't apply for PGWP? Because pretty much all I know is that majority of 99.9% of the colleges in Toronto or in Ontario are part of that designated list of institutions, as well as the university. So first of all, we need to understand why it doesn't allow you to apply for PGWP. And then again, we would have to look into your situation. What's your educational background before starting this program in Canada? What's your work experience background? And how long your study permit is valid in Canada? And can you look for any potential employer if you find an employer with the specifics that's related to your background? What are the other ways of work permit that we can apply for you other than PGWP? So again, I need more information to be able to answer you.
Okay, so we have another question that's asking, due to the shortage of healthcare staff, healthcare agencies and institutions are offering positions to holders of visitor or student permits, but the wait time for a work permit to be issued can be up to 2 years. So I guess their question is regarding processing times for work permits.
So when you're saying that the wait times are up to 2 years, I'm wondering which country they're coming from, because it's certainly not 2 years. I mean, the longest that we've seen, Rebecca, is from Nigeria, South Africa, and that's less than just shy of 1 year. So
yes.
I personally haven't seen anything close to 2 years. That's a very long period of time. But definitely, I mean, given the fact that, like I said, I kind of mentioned in my talk about the shortages of skilled talent, definitely there's a big focus on healthcare industry. We know that there are nurses, there are healthcare workers, doctors, surgeons that are, we've got a huge shortage of them in Canada. And so speaking of that, there are programs that are expediting and facilitating those people to apply for work permit or PR in Canada. Again, if you have filed your application or filed certain people's application already, get in touch with me and let me know like which consulate is processing the applications. And if it's taking that long, then there is a huge problem. We have to look into that. Or if you're willing to apply, you haven't applied yet, and you're willing to apply in the future, again, get in touch with us so that I tell you exactly which category of work permit you should apply to, so that you get that expedited processing benefits.
Okay, so we have a question from Fabiana, who's the Director of Operations of a Canadian Ontario Registered Incorporated business. Our General Manager is in Brazil, but they'd like him to move to Canada. What would be the company's responsibilities or charges to sponsor him, and through which program?
I mean, Fabienne, this is a very specific question. I need to understand what exactly your company is doing in Canada, how many employees you have in Canada, and what's the specifics of this general manager, individual employee that you're trying to transfer to Canada, and then be able to figure out. In general, we could look into any of the LMIA categories or the ICT, intercorporate transferee, if you're bringing somebody from the parent to the subsidiary company in Canada. But we have to look into the details. Feel free to send me an email and we can set up a call, a quick call to go over the details and commitments. If there's any LMIE involved, then there's obviously commitment involved, and then we can chat about that too.
Okay, and then we have another question saying, do you think that the PGWP extension would continue for the next years?
It's a really tough question. I mean, it's not my place to comment on this because the decision is ultimately is coming from the department, from the immigration department and the government. For now, I see a lot of leniency. As I said, it all goes back to the shortages that we're feeling in Canada. So for now, PHWPs are extendable for another 18 months. Whether they're going to continue this regulation for the time being, I have no idea. It's too early to comment on that.
Okay, and someone's asking if you can elaborate into the hospitality and HR fields. It's a little bit difficult to do that without further information again.
Exactly, and I don't know what they mean by elaboration, like what kind of information exactly. If you can maybe just give us more specifics or email us more specifics, we'll be able to help you with that.
Another question that we have is if an employee is qualified under both GTS and LMIA and ICT, which category would you suggest as a better option?
That's a very good question. So GTS and LMIA, they're both great categories. They're both great, processes. My only comment would be that with GTS, obviously comes the commitment. Remember, we talked about the LMIAs and the commitment that you have to provide to the government. So if the company, the employer is okay with that part, again, when I talk about commitments, I don't want anybody to be scared or, pushed back. It's not a huge or a daunting process. It's just an organic way of, growing in Canada, but it's something that you have to commit to on the paper. And so if the employer is happy and willing to do that, then I would say absolutely go with GTS LMIA, because once you have that LMIA approval, work permit approval is almost 99% guaranteed. Whereas in ICT case, you do have to provide explanations and supporting documents to show the relationship between the companies outside of Canada and inside Canada, and also how this person or the employee that's being transferred is skilled or talent or a manager. So it kind of, it might feel that open area for the immigration officer to interpret anything that they want to, and it might, sort of lead to refusal. So I guess the end of the story is that if you've got a document like LMIA that kind of supports the outcome of the file, approval of the file, why not doing that as opposed to the other category?
Okay, so we have another question from Francois, who's a manager for Major Drilling. For the benefits of their workers, they want to assist with sending their family members of their workers to get a study permit. Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question. And they're asking whether the first step is to contact the consulate directly or use a specialized agency, or whether we can assist.
So I'm trying to understand exactly what the question is about. Are they asking about getting admission in Canada for those family members? I mean, the children, obviously, of these workers, I'm assuming, or is that how to apply for their study permit? Like, because there are two types. When we're talking about the study permits, there are two stages to the process. One is to get an admission from a college, university, or if the dependent child is underage, there must be a school like high school, elementary school, or middle school that the child has to go and study. Like, we have to have that kind of confirmation as the first step in order to apply for that dependent child's study permit. So the first stage, which is the admission part, usually we're not involved. We can refer you to other organizations that are focused solely on that. But the second part, which is the study permit application, we can definitely help you filing that for your employees.
Okay, and then another question is somewhat related. Are children qualified as dependents, and what type of permits will be issued for them?
So children, yes, children under the age of 22 are considered dependent family members. And I just mentioned that, they're either coming, if they're young, they're either coming to pre-kindergarten or elementary school or middle school or high school, or if they're a little bit older, then after the age of 18, they'll typically go to study in colleges or universities. So the first part, if they're going to school here, they don't necessarily need an admission, but they need a letter, a confirmation letter from the school. It says that you have registered the student at that school. But if they're going to college or university, the admission letter is definitely part of the main documents in the file. And then based on that, we can apply for a study permit. We should also show that the main applicant, which is one of the parents, either dad or mom, who are in Canada, are holding a work permit, and this kid is coming as a dependent family member of that parent.
Okay, great. And someone just wants some more clarification on GTS Lmia versus Lmia exempt and the occupations under the GTS list.
So there are two very different categories. GTS Lmia is an LMIA related category where LMIA has to be applied for. And like I said, Service Canada is involved in the process. So the first stage of the application is to file the LMIA application to Service Canada, wait for 10 business days, get the LMIA approval, and then apply for a work permit. The LMIA exempt, as the name says, it's LMIA exempt. It doesn't require any LMIA, right? And we discussed that what are the LMIA exempt categories? It's either ICT or under any of the free trade agreements, or you're an SUV applicant and you're trying to apply for a work permit. So they're two different things. And doesn't mean that if somebody is qualified for this is not qualified for that, or vice versa. So again, I think I need more elaborations on that in order to answer properly.
Okay, just looking through to see if we have any other questions. We have another question that says, how can IRCC expedite the work permit for individuals who have job offers in healthcare, waiting for more than 6 months, and that work permit can sometimes be unreasonable? Why can't there be sort of a path like express entry?
I mean, that's more for the government to analyze and assess and consider. For us, there is definitely going to be grounds for expediting the process for healthcares. Absolutely. Like I said, there are special programs for healthcares right now because we know that there's a huge shortage of healthcare workers in Canada. So again, I need to understand if the application is in process right now, what type of application it is, whether it's a work permit or PR, to which consulate the application has been filed to, and then sort of get it from there, start communicating with the consulate if it's been in the process for 6 months or more. Why is it exactly, and what's the processing time in that particular consulate to begin with, and sort of figuring out, navigating on how to communicate with them and expedite the process.
Okay, and someone else asks, is there any chance for the work permit under the startup visa program to be issued for 3 years instead of like just a 1 year process?
No, so typically it's being issued for 1 year, but it's extendable in Canada. So, and I see that as, this is actually a good question, because SUV applications, like you said, the processing timelines are really huge right now. It's close to 3 years. And so what happens is that if the applicant comes right after applying for SUV under a work permit, then obviously 1 year is not sufficient until they get their PR approval. So they have to continuously extend. And this is the pattern that we're seeing a lot these days. So it may very well be the case that, immigration department comes in the next couple of months, don't quote me on that, but they come and say, you know, looking at the trend, saying that, okay, now the SUV work permits could be issued on up to 3 years or 2 years or whatever the case is, more than 1 year, because clearly that's not sufficient. And clearly that's sort of adding to how the system is functioning right now. And that's against the efficiency that the system is going towards. So maybe we hear some news about that in the future.
I think we've answered everyone's questions.
Oh, that was a lot of questions,
yeah.
good questions too. I mean, I tried to answer as much as I could, but some of them obviously required more elaboration for me to give a, you know, proper answer. So by all means, try to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer. Rebecca as well. We can set up a call, quick call, if we can't answer by email, and then try to understand the situation and advise you to the best of our knowledge. Thank you for attending the call. Thanks for everyone who participating and taking time from their busy lives. Thanks to BCC again for hosting this webinar, and I'll leave it to you, Adriani.
Well, on
Thank you
behalf
so much.
of the BCCC, I want to thank you, Sonia and Rebecca, for your presentations. This webinar has been recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in the next few days. Thank you for joining us today, and remember to follow the Brazil Canada Chamber of Commerce on social media. Thanks, you.
Thanks, Adriani. Have a good day.
Thank you,
Bye,
Adriani.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for attending.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.